Hello, everyone. My name is Shaun. I'm from Ipsos and I lead creative excellence globally here, and that's everything to do with advertising research. And I'm joined today with Adam Sheridan, my colleague who's in London. I'm in Hamburg. Adam, you can introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Sheridan, Head of Products and Analytics at Ipsos, and the author of the publication that we'll talk about, MISFITS.
This session is really dedicated to help you better understand the role of creativity in advertising, and it's based on our latest thinking, our latest thought leadership, where Adam has been in the driving seat of authoring this publication that he started a little while ago, and now we have released this publication out into the public. So without further ado, let me get started. So the first thing I wanted to just speak about is Creative Excellence's mission at Ipsos, or for any of our clients, is to help brands really harness creativity and, as I mentioned, spark brand growth. We are one of the world's leading advertising research agencies, and we've been busy in this industry since the inception of Ipsos, which is around 40 years ago. So introducing MISFITS, you're probably wondering what is MISFITS and why this title, and what do we cover in MISFITS today? So I'll speak a little bit about that, but Adam really is going to go into more detail. So a little bit I'll say is we talk about what creativity really means in advertising, and there's obviously a debate that Adam will tap into, and where we have come up with an opinion, what we've actually learned from people in the industry, from normal consumers, and come up with our own definition. So we'll speak about that. But we've also taken inspiration, or Adam has taken inspiration in his book, from people in the industry who use creativity as a catalyst, and we learn from misfits of the world, and then of course we'll talk about how creativity can contribute to end advertising outcomes. And if we see that this contribution is positive, our focus is really how can we more confidently apply this to advertising when we develop advertising and deliver our messages to people, hoping that. So one of the things we want to talk about and we need to reflect on is that creativity is mostly a challenge for most of our clients, and they know, especially in the marketing part of it, that they need to harness creativity, but often they don't have the confidence to do this, and this is because there is this notion of a creativity gap that exists, and you see this clearly from the data on this chart, where we see that CFOs have a different level of perception of how creativity can influence or how it should be harnessed, or rather invested in. And you can see the numbers there really, really low. But if we look at the numbers from our marketing partners, we can see that creativity is seen as extremely valuable. So we need, as a research partner for clients, we need to be able to help you to change and help the mindsets within the companies, and even help promote a culture of creativity that can, in the end, get to effective advertising. And MISFITS will help you do that. Adam.
Thanks very much, Shaun, for that introduction. And yeah, I think before we actually explore what creativity means in advertising and how it can contribute to end effects, we need to first start with the problems that it has and expand on what you said, Shaun. And I think that in the end, what we've seen is that lack of confidence between the belief that creativity can work through to convincing financial decision makers to release budget, time, and resources to pursue it. The gap really is driven by two key things that I explore in the book. And the first is how we are as people, as human beings, that what we see in this image on the screen is a representation of how we process information, and it's really to the automatic that we gravitate to, and it's in this that we have a pursuit of efficiency, and that's very much useful for us. It helps us make lots of decisions, make choices, and get on with our lives. On the other hand, it's anchored in safety and familiarity. It's anchored in references to the past for us to understand what choices we'll make in the present and the future. And we shouldn't really feel bad about this, because what we see in the evidence that I profile in the book is that this mentality to gravitate to the safe and familiar, it starts at a very early age. in the school system, where creativity, if anything, is avoided and expunged from our lives. And actually, there's a focus on standardized outcomes and tests and getting to the next scorecard, rather than learning things, rather than pursuing new ideas and thinking. And that kind of mentality, it pervades into our adult lives. It pervades into the corporate world. And we see in a lot of studies across the world in academia that can help us understand that despite saying that creativity is a good thing in the business world, a lot of corporate decision makers will still gravitate to the safe and familiar, will still gravitate to a more certain outcome. And again, I don't think we should feel bad about this. I think it's us as human beings and our quest for certainty. And as a result, in marketing, marketers are no different to everybody else. And it's not surprising that we therefore see conformity, we see safety and familiarity in the advertising on our screens. And we have some examples playing here. Auto advertising has very established category codes, winding roads, the car drives down, beautiful people driving the car. Beer advertising, another example, there are established category codes such as condensation on the bottle, the promise of refreshment. What it all means is that we're following a well-trodden path, and in the marketing community, we may think that's the right thing to do. We may think there's safety in numbers, so to speak, but actually what we'll see in the evidence in this webinar is that that's the path to mediocrity rather than to strong success. And if that's one problem creativity has, is that lack of confidence and that gravity to safety and familiarity. Another it has is a lack of shared language. There are many definitions as to what creativity means in advertising from industry thought leaders, and we should respect those. However, what I explore in the book and look to understand is that, yes, the lack of shared language, and also a real tonality of confrontation and a focus on originality. One word that was profiled in the book of chaos. Another, if we continue here in the builds, looking to disturb people, and on and on. So another, breaking things, and then finally subverting expectations. And there's a near confrontation being set up with agencies and with brands, and because brands will want certain returns, and agencies are saying that originality and creativity is what matters. So we look to actually explore in the book, is that really the case? Is confrontation and originality the genesis of creativity? And really, the essence of Misfits as a publication and the value we bring with the publication is looking to the most important people in advertising, and that's regular people. And we asked regular people, what does creativity in advertising mean to them? And you can see the outcome of that analysis on the screen, where yes, originality and difference is played back by people in an open-ended response, but it's accompanied by other themes, and themes that less represent the perception of creativity in advertising and more the experience of it. So the feeling of having fun and being entertained, finding the experience just interesting, or in the yellow, having a feeling of joy, of happiness. So what we see here is a much more nuanced picture than originality and difference alone, and this is what led to the definition that we propose in the book from the voice of regular people, the most important people in advertising whose behavior is invested into change. And the definition is this, that original or different experience adds some value to the audience. And the value can come in different forms. It can be entertainment, it can be something that's useful or interesting in their lives, but it can't just be originality for originality's sake. Well, if this definition may feel appropriate based on the responses to regular people in advertising, where else may we see it in the experiences that people have and value, and what can we possibly learn from that? And from my perspective, I've always been a big believer that advertising is a pillar in a way of the culture of a country. It's part of the cultural fabric of society. And so to my mind, it stood to reason to explore other types of experiences in culture, such as movies, music, and in this case on screen, video games. And what we see here is the sales analysis of a series of games for Nintendo, which was created by one of the misfits we profiled in the book, Shigeru Miyamoto. And this series of games was successful for Nintendo, but when we classify them into two different types of games, one that is simply a repetition, is simply just showing people what they've seen before and experienced before, versus one that evolves, that builds on a foundation of familiarity, but evolves over time. So adding value, but also from a basis of familiarity. What we see across the games being shown on screen here, those in the blue, is that more often than not they will sell more than the preceding game. And I see this time and time again in other entertainment properties across movies and across music, is that interaction between familiarity and originality, so therefore delivering some value. In this case, familiar stories of heroes, of wizards and of princesses, with new original gaming features across the series. More often than not, we see more incremental value delivered to the audience. And it's with this reference point from regular people in their perception of advertising and in culture more broadly, that we then ask ourselves a question: well, where may this definition appear at all in the experience of advertising? We evaluate thousands and thousands of ads at Ipsos every year. We have a lot of data. So what we looked to understand via an analysis was, well, where may this experience and this definition appear? We actually found three overall experiences of advertising that we'll show to you now, where we see creativity playing a role. The first is a creative experience. So that feeling that the advertising was unique, you hadn't seen it before, that it entertained you and it was inherently talkable. Then a second experience, creative ideas. So less about the experience of the advertising itself, but more about the concepts, the information in the advertising. Not necessarily about product information, but this sense that you were introduced to things you weren't aware of before, choices in your life, values, opportunities, and by extension, that advertised brand is considered to be different. And finally, empathy and fitting in. Less about creativity, if anything, very uncreative in a way, because it's about familiarity, and most importantly, this belief, this feeling that the advertising is targeted to you. It's targeted to the audience that receives it, that experiences it, and as a result, we'll see in a few screens' time that can have a basis of familiarity from which originality can interact. And when we bring these three advertising experiences together, we look to understand in a second step of our analysis where, if at all, may they have a link to creative effects, and if they do, what can we learn from this? And we'll look at this this analysis now on the next screen. What we simply have on this screen here is a visual representation of the strength of relationship between the advertising experiences I just described on the previous screen at the top, with our key effects metrics in our ad testing solution, Creative Spark, across memory encoding, short-term choice potential, and long-term relationship potential. And the thickness of the lines that we'll see represent the strength of the relationship. So the first key finding that we discovered is that creative experience, that belief that you saw something you hadn't seen before, that it entertained you and it was talkable, has by far and away the strongest relationship with memory encoding. Memory encoding being that price of admission, the ability of the advertising to be encoded in the mind to give you the opportunity to later influence choice and consumption. And by comparison, a relatively weak relationship with other effects. The second key finding is that for short-term choices, we actually found a very similar level of relationship between creative ideas and empathy and fitting in, that belief that the advertising was targeted to you, that it was designed for you. And in fact, we see an interaction between those two experiences to influence choices in the short term, which we'll expand on in a few moments. And the third finding that we discovered is that in the longer term, so that ability of advertising to grow market share in the long term outside of a short-term sales cycle, is that while empathy and fitting in matters, actually creative ideas matters slightly more. So that introduction of something new has that opportunity and a stronger relationship to drive longer-term market share growth. So that in of itself, we think, is a useful thing for the industry. The question is now, why might those relationships be there? What can we learn from them to get to more creative and therefore more effective advertising? I think the ad that we see on the screen here, which should be playing in a few moments, really exemplifies why this might be the case. And this is an ad playing on screen here for Heineken Green Bottle beer, and it's using the character of James Bond and the actor Daniel Craig. And in the ad, which some of you may have already seen, what we see is that Daniel Craig's on holiday. He gets into a taxi to go to the airport. He leaves his passport in the taxi, and what ensues is a chase between him and the taxi, where he's constantly confused with his character of James Bond, and he can't meet that expectation. He can't run fast enough. He doesn't have his tuxedo. He's bumping into people, and of course, at the end of the ad, he's drinking the Heineken beer rather than his traditional vodka martini. So what does this mean? It means, I think, it poses a question, this particular campaign. And the question is this: is this advertising or is it entertainment? And I would actually venture that it's both, and that's somewhat the point. That as brands and marketers, I think we need to now change our mindset slightly to be in the service of an audience, to entertain them, to pay that price of admission before we could have the opportunity to influence behaviour, rather than thinking about how we can land those rational claims, how we can land 3 or 4 messages to push people to buy things. We need to be treating people as an audience to entertain, and that this campaign is a good example of that. Just building on this further, so relationship between creative ideas and long-term brand building potential of advertising. So why might this be the case? Well, if we think about advertising that has potential to grow brands in the long term, what it's doing is it's adding more and more buyers over time, so you increase your market share. So you're recruiting more people rather than getting the existing people to buy more, typically. And the ad showing on screen, I think, really illustrates how, with creative advertising, showing you creative ideas, you may be able to do this. And this ad is for Icebreaker skiwear. And while it does deliver humor and does deliver a creative experience, what it does brilliantly is presents a juxtaposition between the traditional choice of plastic skiwear and merino wool clothing. And when I interviewed the brand managers at Icebreaker about this campaign, they were very cognizant of the fact that people didn't know a lot about merino wool, a more breathable and, they would argue, more fashionable choice for skiwear clothing, and they really wanted to push that creative idea, that new choice, that new value, that new potential. And what we see is this particular campaign and others that take a similar approach can really get to those longer term market share effects as a result. And finally, just to share another highlight in the pages of the publication, when we start to look at advertising in the short term, what can we learn? Well, actually what we learn is that creativity alone isn't the only thing that matters to influence choices in the short term. And it comes back to who we are as people. What we see actually, again, in that need for familiarity as well as the power of originality, what we can see is when those two things interact on the right of this chart, advertising that performs highly on creativity and on empathy can have a plus 20% short-term sales effect as represented by its performance on our creative effect index. And to look to a campaign that provides an example, I think, that can illustrate this well, we can see an ad here for Volvo. It takes a very different approach to the auto advertising that we showed earlier, because it's doing something quite different. It's focusing on the people that Volvo want to appeal to, in this case new parents, rather than the car itself. The car is always there. It's nearly a member of the family, but it's not the focal point. And it shows the safety features of the vehicle by its impact on their lives, as opposed to in a very abstract way just showing the features, which auto advertising can often be guilty of doing. So I think what we see then in just these brief highlights of the book is that we have robust generalizable evidence that confirm creativity does matter in advertising. When we hear from the voice of regular people about that value that it needs to deliver to an audience, and therefore across a creative experience, entertaining to pay that price of admission in memory encoding, delivering creative ideas to recruit more buyers in the longer term, and to get short-term sales lifts. Certainly having that interaction between creativity and holding empathy for the audience, showing stories that reflect them and their world and their challenges, rather than just myopically focusing on product details, can be a really good path to get to stronger advertising effect.
Yeah, and I think we've got just a few examples before we close the presentation, Adam. So let's move on to one that comes from Mexico. And I think what I'll do now is I'll just show the ad and then we'll talk a little bit about it. It's for Lady Speed Stick. So let's watch the ad.
You are unstoppable, go for it in there. Don't let anything put you down. Don't let it pull you down. Only you know who you really are. So put your head up, so put your head up, so put your head up, so put your head up.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree, and certainly Adam, we could discuss that this is a very unique ad that basically cleverly used parts of the framework that you describe in your book and what you've explained to the audience today. So I think for me, the central part of the story is really leveraging that empathy part and the fact that women can associate with those characters in the story. It's not something that's far-fetched and far away from maybe everyday life. And I think that makes it very, very approachable, very, very relevant and credible in a way. So that's kind of the golden thread for me in that story, and really neatly do it. And it's a simple, let's be honest, a simple ad. It's not a long story or director's cut, but very cleverly done. And I think that fits nicely into this ad as well. And we have one more example, which will be interesting to talk about. So this one was released a little while ago. I'll play the ad and then we'll talk about it. So let's have a look.
Gary's daughter likes to dress up like a princess. Is this bad parenting? Jada wants to delete the text message she sent to her ex, but that sends a message that she deleted a message, which is worse than the original message. Frederick wants to leave a better world for his children, but he'd have to have children, which experts say is the least sustainable thing for the planet. Stella's neighbor got a dog called Max. That's her son's name. Did they give their dog a human name? Or did she give her son a dog name? She's confused. Daryl downloaded an app to get, the physical. It's where he met his wife. Now, they don't get physical anymore. Alejandro just bought an eco-friendly washing machine on Black Friday. Did he do something good for the environment, or something really, really bad? Sophie read that it's not safe to drink the tap water, and that plastic bottles kill the planet. How is she supposed to hydrate? She's got 3 days to find out. The world just keeps getting more and more confusing. So obviously, Burger King launches chicken nuggets that got no chicken, but taste like chicken. Plant-based chicken nuggets? Confused.
Yeah, this ad definitely raised a lot of debate in our team, and let's be honest, we know Burger King are very creative in the way, or the agencies that they use in their own marketing teams are honestly quite creative and produce some brilliant stuff. But from the data is that we see actually that the ad itself, its title is confusing, and it does become actually a bit confusing for most people. So it's kind of like they may be being very unique and surprising in the style of creative that they've used, but they've fallen short on the things that probably matter. And you can see from the results from the method that Adam mentioned earlier from Creative Spark, our pre-testing solution. So I think you would agree, Adam, that's not probably the best piece of creative that's been used. An interesting attempt to create surprise and let's say some drama into this conflict between chicken and plant-based, but maybe a little bit too far.
Yeah, again, I agree with your summary completely, Shaun. And to add just a short statement, you could see what they were trying to do. They certainly had creativity in mind, but perhaps they had the definition in mind that focused on originality alone, and thought a little bit less about the value for their audience and the value of the experience for their audience. And that's maybe where it falls down.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam, just to summarize, I think you've done a great job of just giving the audience a taste of what MISFITS and our approach to creativity in advertising is about?
Yes, sure. So what you can see on the screen here, in fact, is it's somewhat of a tagline of our book. And if there's one thing to take away, I think it should be this: that in the end, creativity is a mindset, and it's a mindset to empower you to focus on your audience, the people that you want to choose you, that you want to buy you. Focus on them. Don't focus on your product alone. And if you do that, if you have that mindset to create that advertising that surprises, that entertains, that is framed in the world of the people you want to appeal to, all the evidence that we have is pointing in the direction that that's the thing that sparks brand growth, and the thing that doesn't and is the path to mediocrity is doing what everyone else does and focusing on selling products to consumers rather than, as we've said, delivering a good experience of value to audiences. So that as a 30-second summary, I think is really where we should focus everyone's minds to get some more creative and effective advertising.
Absolutely, couldn't have said it better. Thank you very much, Adam. So thanks very much for watching and listening to us. And I think now we will move over to panel discussion, I believe. So